Well, Stephanie and Regina, we're learning that Griffin, his dog, and another man named Chad, who was on the boat, were all seen at Rudy Inlet on Sunday morning. One man says he helped get them in contact with a mechanic to help get the boat started.
For years, fans have watched the cast of Wicked Tuna fight the brutish waters of the Atlantic, chasing six-figure paydays, fighting for fortune and glory. Over the years, fans have developed a connection to the cast, especially the family dynamics, with the Marcianos being a big star of the show. But after the show ended in 2024, familiar faces started to disappear, and everything changed. Why did the show really come to an end? How has the cast fared since the show ended? Join us as we discuss life after Wicked Tuna for its cast members. Heave ho! Gloucester, Massachusetts, has long been the home of some of the most interesting fishermen in the United States. Whether they were chasing a bluefin tuna or steering their boats in the most violent storms of the Atlantic, it just always came with some style. But even in that reality, it was almost as though no one had imagined having these brave fishermen and boat captains on national television chasing tuna and competing wildly for the best kill. But in 2012, everything changed. National Geographic chose an aquatic show that captured the most disturbing aspect of the hard work required in the historic fishing industry in the United States. Where better to go than the shores of Gloucester, Massachusetts, home to the bravest sea captains? By April 1st, 2012, the stage was set. National Geographic caught America by surprise, introducing local fishing heroes who brave the oceans every day in search of bluefin tuna. But they weren't just introduced by their profession and their competitive edge. The showrunners wanted a more human touch, so the cameras didn't just follow the boats and the hunts. It was a show where the bluefin tuna, the boats, and their captains shared equal roles and were just as important. It wasn't long before fans grew instantly attached to the cast. In many ways, the show fulfilled more than the showrunners really planned. While millions of viewers were welcome to the bluefin industry in the spotlight like never before, they often waited behind the cast members. Suddenly, the show weighed more than the usual tuna runs and instead created an attachment on a more intimate level with the viewers. Even though the show had finally captured many hearts, the runners still fantasized about profit and loss. It's a business after all, and they don't survive on debt and poor ratings. For a while, it seemed the show would last forever, and its brave captains alongside it, sailing the ocean with one goal in mind: being the king of bluefin tuna hunting. In the initial series premiere, the show took the world by storm, garnering just over 1 million views. But after the fourth season, America seemed to have shifted its palette to something else. And just like that, the show started to lose its usual views, and interest deteriorated. While on a clock to survive the harsh realities of Hollywood, the show ran until season 13 in 2024. The eggheads at National Geographic realized that the cost of keeping a 200-plus episode series was an arm and a leg. With cast salaries compounding and production costs skyrocketing, it seemed like the best decision for the channel at the time. Maybe it did make financial sense to let go of the show for National Geographic. Long-term fans of the show had continuously asked questions about these popular cast members that have completely disappeared like an afterthought. What really happened to these cast members after the show? Captain Dave Marciano and the family legacy. After the show ended, fans asked the same burning questions about the cast members, especially the leading names and families, especially the Marcianos. Did their father, Dave, keep the fish business running on hard merchandise, his iconic 38-foot wooden stern picker built in 1984? Or did he finally let go of the boat, which he had captained since he was much younger? But why would fans be so interested in this man's life? Dave was no ordinary fisherman. In fact, his story was almost good enough for a soap opera, but maybe that's what made the Wicked Tuna show so much fun. More than just a regular fishing thrill show, it came with a backstory for these brave captains. For context, on the show, Dave often braved the seas, commanding the hard merchandise with a two-man crew, his son, and his nephew. For most fans, it wasn't hard to see that he was indeed building a legacy for when he retires, or at least if he ever does. But was fishing also handed to him as a child? Dave's story was rather different, and, for most people, surprising. Dave never grew up in a family that treated fishing as a sport or handled it as an industry. For him, it was a whole different experience. As a child, he fished for hours on end, but it did not really click as a solid profession until he moved to Boston, Massachusetts. He lived very close to a harbor, meaning he could simply walk out of the house to fish for as long as he wanted. He started earning a living in fishing while he was still in high school, working on the Yankee Fleet, a chartered vessel that did day trips for fishing and whale watching. After a few years, he got his captain's license, and the rest, as they say, is history. Perhaps it is why he wanted to be different and banged on and on about legacy. However, since the show ended, long-term viewers have asked the same questions. What is Dave doing now? Did he lose his spark as soon as the channel's cameras rolled out? Well, absolutely not. The show might have ended, but the thrill of the hunt remained. His hunger and competitive nature, especially with Dave Carraro, continue even now. But speaking of Carraro, how has he fared since the show ended? The captain who refused to slow down. While Marciano had often caught the eye with his expertise and his dynamic with his son and nephew on hard merchandise, Dave Carraro was no slouch either. Just like Dave, Carraro had been fishing since he was a child, somewhere around the ages of 11 and 13. But bluefin fishing is no child's business, and he knew it too. So he started slowly. From being a crew member on party boats to a few sports fishing boats, and eventually canyon fishing. The progress was slow and rigorous, but he went along with it regardless. Talk about passion for the secrets of the deep blue. But more than his skills as an experienced bluefin tuna angler, viewers could tell that he had something in common with Dave Marciano. They weren't all that different in the way they chased after a goal. It was almost like they had a bone to pick with it. Yet, they never really saw eye to eye on anything. The competition was fierce, and both Daves went after the other's neck, going straight for the jugular, oscillating between first and second place. On sheer sales, both Daves were a menace, but when there is a leaderboard, they just couldn't win, could they? And just like that, the battle for the top of the board intensified. While on the fvtuna.com, Dave Carraro's 44-meter-wide ship, he once caught a bluefin tuna, which earned him just over $16,000. He found a buyer almost immediately, and it was strung up and trailered away. If nothing else was real, the joy of catching the fish was a feeling that lasted forever. But spending time with what he had caught was almost impossible. Everything moved at breakneck speed, from a catch to a sale and a place on top of the leaderboard. But just as Captain Dave Carraro pursued perfection and Dave Marciano wanted legacy, both men met somewhere in the middle of it all: the thrill of fishing. However, just like every great rivalry and every great profession, there was some space for respect. Perhaps their approach was almost completely dissimilar, but the goal was always the same: entertain the fans and give National Geographic a reason to come back and keep the show running. And it worked. At least until it didn't. But even after the show, most fans wondered what Marciano's biggest competition does now. Although the cameras were no longer rolling, Dave Carraro continued to fish. While it comes as a surprise to some fans that a 58-year-old continued to journey the deep blue sea in search of yet another huge kill, it was rarely new territory for long-term fans. He had always sought the edge and looked to win all the time. So even while he holds a record of finding over 9 giant bluefin tuna, he still had one thing on his mind: expanding the gap between him and the rest. Maybe that's why fans truly connect with him. They weren't just watching a fisherman at work. They were seeing a man who just wouldn't give up on being at the top of the line every time. Even though the captain has refused to slow down, deciding to raid the oceans for as long as he can, not many others had the chance to make that choice. When life makes a choice for you. One of the biggest captains to ever cross the Atlantic from Gloucester was Captain Charlie Griffin. While Charlie never really lasted that long on the show, appearing on seasons through 5, in the short span, he was a fan favorite. He has a serious sense of humor and a comedic timing that fans enjoyed almost as much as his skills as a bluefin tuna fisherman. Although the showrunners often made the choice between the different kinds of fishermen, choosing whom to follow in their expedition every season, it still seemed rather odd to long-term viewers that he never appeared on the show after the first season. Was he carefully written out of the show, or was there a sinister controversy behind the scenes? While viewers barely had any real answer to his disappearance from the show, it didn't take a genius to see that they wondered what he was up to as he slowly faded away from the cast list. Griffin had always been a fisherman. He was on before the cameras ever started rolling, and fans just didn't see why he would stop becoming one just because he had been strategically dumped by the same show that followed him around for the best part of 3 years, hunting cod and angling bluefin tunas. But season after season, the show got bigger and better, and Griffin merely appeared as an afterthought to even long-term fans who might have heaved a sigh every time they remembered some of his cameos on the show, but rarely protested his absence anymore. Fast forward to May 2024. Everything changed. At first, his absence had become a huge part of the show. It never really appeared with a finality that signified a 100% possibility that he would never return to the show, ever. But on May 4th, 2024, news broke of the great captain's body, discovered on the seas. For context, he had taken his boat, the Reels of Fortune, on what seemed like one last hurrah at the age of 65, and set sail for North Carolina's Outer Banks. Not necessarily to impress anyone, but to relive the experience of the Atlantic's wind smashing the water across his boat, while singing his catchphrase tune, "Tuna fishin', baby, yeah," and that consistent struggle to pull fish right out of the depths. However, when his boat was reported long overdue for a return, the Coast Guard went looking and found his lifeless body floating across the same ocean he had hunted for a lifetime. And the body of his dog, Layla, appeared right on the scene too. Maybe cast members like Dave Carraro and Dave Marciano made the choice to be away from the spotlight after the show ended in 2024. Most viewers expressed unhappiness over Griffin's being robbed of the chance to do the same. But even as fate forcefully closes a chapter, another opened up. Tyler McLaughlin, the young captain who carried the torch. While some captains left memories behind when the show ended, Tyler left with much bigger responsibilities than anyone could have imagined. When he first appeared on the show, he was a 24-year-old lad with a slim build and a baseball hat, looking to fish in the same ocean where the older and more experienced fishermen sometimes struggled. But was that even anywhere near enough to stop him dead in his tracks? Absolutely not. Although he was young, Tyler was deeply experienced at the art of fishing. Raised in Rye Harbor, he learned to fish from his father since the age of 9, and he just couldn't shake it off as he grew up. but whether fishing would become something he did for fun when no one was watching, or whether he was planning to go commercial and make a whole life out of it, he still didn't have an answer. But age sometimes does come with clarity, and he soon figured it out after deciding to work as a commercial fisherman right after his college years. While it wasn't his first time on a fishing boat, it was definitely his first time competing against old heads who stalked the same waters for bluefin tuna. Perhaps the young age might have been a deterrent for most people, but Tyler was different. It was almost as though he enjoyed being the prickly younger fisherman. Nothing fazed him. While he fished the waters, no one could shut him up. He knew well how to compete and keep everyone on their toes. Even though he debuted in the second season, his presence brought a completely different vibe to the show and attracted an even younger audience. But even amidst the joking and laughing, his skills as a fisherman were no joke. Aboard the pinwheel with his longtime friends Nicholas Duffy Fudge and Alex Whitney, he conquered the show in his rookie season. No one saw that coming, not the producers or even the veteran fishermen that he found at Gloucester Harbor. But fate does know how to rear an ugly head when things get too good, with almost no shot at failure in sight. And Tyler could not escape its whims either. His first mate, Duffy, was suddenly reported dead on July 19, 2018, at just 28 years old. Duffy was the perfect supporting cast member any main character could have. He kept the sails going and celebrated every catch just as loudly as Tyler. So, he wasn't just a player in the background whose earth could fade into oblivion. Wicked Tuna felt it at its core. Obviously, fans had questions, dying to know the cause of his demise. However, neither the show nor his family gave any details. Although Tyler did replace the first mate position with his sister, McLaughlin, Duffy's name still resonated with the fans. But since the show ended in 2024, it is rarely too hard to see why fans wanted a glance into his life and what he does now. But Tyler remained a fisherman at heart and in practice even after the cameras stopped rolling. The unsung heroes and the legacy they left behind. While names like Dave Carraro, Tyler McLaughlin, and Dave Marciano often resonated with long-term fans of the show, Wicked Tuna always had heroes whose names often escaped the spotlight. Yet they were just as important to the show's success in the first place. For context, storylines like Dave Marcianos probably appealed more to anyone, even beyond the fishing industry. It's an odyssey of a man who chose to fish in the ocean without anyone really passing it down to him like some family heirloom. Instead, he built the legacy from the top. However, T.J. Ott, son of legendary fisherman Tim Ott, seemed like an obvious story, one rarely told by Hollywood's best reality shows. It's an open secret that cliches don't particularly rule the space. But TJ's story for the fisherman industry, purists, was all that mattered. Legendary fisherman's son, who grew up surrounded by tuna fishing all his life and developed his aggressive fishing style. It was nothing superbly colorful, but it was a fisherman's life, especially for purists of the fishing industry. While his story rarely traveled the fishing space as quickly as Tyler's, Marcianos, or the Carraros, his impact on sections of the fan base can rarely be overlooked. Speaking of the Carraro family, longtime crew member Sandro Maniaci was a valuable deckhand on the fvtuna.com. He was not the captain calling the heave-ho shots on deck, and the boat was not named after him either. However, he was more than a mere deckhand on the show. Fans connected with him because he sold the fvtuna.com as the best boat in the competition every chance he got. For context, in a popular interview, he described the vessel as the very best one on the ocean, especially because they wanted that tuna more every time they were on a hunt. From getting a 20-year-old fish which had seen enough bait to actually bite theirs, to reeling it in until the final harpoon kill, it just felt like a victory earned by everyone aboard the ship. Perhaps the show's true impact was never always about hunting tuna, competing at the highest level to win the prizes, or even entertaining the fans. Maybe the show's true legacy was one giant metaphor for what life really is: fishing for prizes, winning, losing, and sometimes losing lives in the process. Do you think these cast members got the recognition they deserve on the show, and when it ended? Is there a chance that the show ever makes a comeback in the future? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.